want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and in today's video I'm going to discuss Plato's hierarchy of the forms. There's actually two different sides to his hierarchy. We're going to be talking about the ontological half of the hierarchy first, and then we'll be talking about the epistemological half. So with that being said, let's begin Plato's hierarchy of the forms. Okay. The hierarchy of the forms actually begins to be spelled out in the Allegory of the Cave, and I would do a video lecture on the Allegory of the Cave, but I've actually seen a very good animated video on YouTube. So I would recommend, if you're interested in learning about Plato's Allegory of the Cave, to go to YouTube and just type in Allegory Cave Animated. Watch that video. I think it's the first one that comes up. It's very good in explaining sort of the idea of what Plato's Allegory of the Cave is, so I'm not going to do a lecture on the allegory. What I'm going to do now is describe sort of what is governing, the structure that's governing the idea of the Allegory of the Cave, and it's the idea of the forms. Now, there's some philosophers that argue that Plato has a theory of the forms. There are other philosophers that argue that Plato does not have a theory of the forms. I'm in neither camp. I'm just going to assume that he does have a theory of the forms and begin to articulate what that theory might look like. Okay, so first I have to introduce some ideas. The first idea that I need to introduce is ontology. Ontology. Ontology is a theory of being. A theory of being. So in Plato, we're going to be looking at two different forms of his hierarchy, right? We'll be looking at what's known as an ontological half, and that would be a half that is devoted to the theory behind the existence of things, how things come to be. And the second half is known as an epistemological. And the epistemological is not a theory of being, but a theory of understanding or knowledge. Okay, so we'll be doing two. We'll be looking at Plato's ontology with respect to his hierarchy of the forms, but we'll also be looking at Plato's epistemology with respect to his hierarchy of the forms as well. The combination of both his ontology and his epistemology is what's going to give us a thorough understanding of how he articulates the hierarchy of the forms and what function it serves in his analysis. All right. So, with that being said, let's begin. The first thing that we need to do is we need to sort of create the conditions wherein we can discuss this, right? And we'll do this with respect to levels. Right? We'll say that this is level 1, this is level 2, this is level 3, and this is level 4. Right? And also what we'll do is we'll assume and we'll divide this section in half, right? So we have level 1, level 2, a separation, level 3, and level 4. What we'll do is we'll say that this half, right, this half of the column will be Plato's ontological half, right? So this will be his ontological. This would be Plato's ontological half of his hierarchy of forms, and this will be Plato's epistemological. Alright, so we have an ontological half, we have an epistemological half, we have the board divided into two sections and two columns, and we have it from 1 to 4. The most important thing to recognize, first of all, is that the assumption is that we'll be progressing, we'll advance in complexity, we'll also advance in our ability to reach truth as we go from 4 to 1. So there are a few assumptions that we need to address first. The first assumption, and I'll just write it over here, assumptions. The first assumption is that progressing from a level 4 to a level 1 is a progression towards truth. So progression from level 4 to level 1 is a progression toward truth. Alright, so we would say that level 4 for all of these accounts, both the ontological and the epistemological, have progression from 4 to 1. As we progress up this ladder, so to speak, we are increasing in truth, so that 3 is more truthful, is more of a representation, a more truthful representation of reality than 4 is, 2 is than 3, 1 is than 2, and so on. So that the ultimate representation of truth is 1, the least representation of truth is 2. Also, as we progress, and I'm not going to write all of it, I'll just put, as we progress from 1 to 4, or sorry, from 4 to 1, we increase in reality. So the second assumption that we're going to make with respect to this is that as we progress from 4 to 1, we increase reality. So that 3 is more real than 4, 2 is more real than 3, and 1 is the most real, according to Plato's hierarchy of the forms, both for his ontological and his epistemological halves. So these assumptions hold true for both. The next thing to recognize, the last really assumption, is that as we progress from 4 to 1, right, as we progress from 4 to 1, and this is the most important thing, is that we leave embodiment for transcendence, right? So we approach transcendence as we increase from 4 to 1. So as we increase from 4 to 1, we approach from 4 to 1, we approach transcendence. So that transcendence is embodied in 1, and our embodiment is embodied in 4. Right? So this is the most tangible, right? This is the most tangible, but as we've seen, it's the least real, right? So number 4 is the most tangible, but it's the least real. Number 1 is a representation of the least tangible, but it's the most real, right? So that's important, and I'll actually write that down because it's important to understand sort of this inverse relationship in his hierarchy of the forms. So number 4 is most tangible, but least real. Number 1 is least tangible, but most real. Okay, so the lowest level is the most tangible, but it's the least real. That's number 4. And number 1 is the least tangible, but it's the most real, right? And as we've seen, as we progress from 4 to 1, we increase in reality. Now, with all of these assumptions set out, now we can actually get into the analysis of his hierarchy of forms. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill out each side respectively. So we'll go through his ontological half, we'll discuss how his ontological half unfolds, then we'll go through his epistemological half. Since we understand that epistemology is a theory of knowledge, a theory of understanding, you can expect that with respect to his epistemological half, it's going to be a discussion on how we come to understand the things that are most true, the things that we can conceptualize the greatest, the things that we can't. Similarly, in his ontological half, it's a theory of being, so we're going to be talking about things in the world, matter, stuff, objects, and so on. And we'll see how these things approach transcendence as we go up a level.